Hi and welcome to the GP Property Podcast brought to you by GP Surveyors, the UK's leading primary care surveyor.
I'm your host Becky and I'm one of the directors here at GP Surveyors. Through this podcast series we're hoping to explore key topics, challenges and opportunities surrounding GP premises. From leases and ownership to funding regulations and the ever-changing primary care landscape. Whether you're a GP partner, a practice manager or someone who's keenly interested in the property side of general practice, we're here to discuss our insights, any questions you may have and help navigate the complex world of healthcare premises. To kick this podcast off, we're going to start with notional rent. What it is, how we challenge it and how we can look to increase it and what that means for succession. So without further ado, let's start with notional rent. What is notional rent? Well, firstly, it refers to an estimated rental value of a property that is not actually rented out. What does that mean? Well, notional rent is placed on properties that GPs own and occupy. So the owner works within the premises. How we look to estimate the rental value of a GP premises is we put hypothetical lease terms in place. These are set out within the premises cost directions, and I'm sure there'll be a further podcast series to discuss those later. But as a standard and as a norm, they tend to look as a 15-year lease with 3 yearly rent reviews, tenants internal repair. And from them hypothetical lease terms, we can start to estimate a rental value for notional rent. So what does that mean? How does it come about? I think the main thing to recognise is that the start of discussing notional rent is to know that whether you are an owner-occupier. So from there, the ICB or the health board, depending on where you are in the country, will send you out something called a CMR1 form to fill out. Now this form discusses everything to do with your property. Every room, what it's used for, Monday through to Friday, whether you have extra sessions on, that kind of thing. What in general is the property used for? Which rooms have GMS contract services? Which rooms potentially have third-party services? And it's all noted within the CMR1 form, which is normally filled out by the practice manager or business manager, or overseen by the GP partner. A top tip here would be for you to save that CMR1 form when it gets sent to you by the ICB and after you've filled it out in a property folder. And from there, in your 3 yearly rent review, you can pull it out and see what's changed and you're not having to fill it in from scratch. But once you have filled it in and it's been checked and you know everything's correct in there, then you send that back to the ICB or the health board. They will then instruct the district valuer to come out or do a desktop valuation dependent on the last time that they saw your property and dependent on what changes have happened within that time frame for that property. The district valuer will use those hypothetical lease terms, 15 years, tenants internal repair, 3 yearly rent reviews, to have an estimated value of rent. Once that estimated value of rent has been approved by the ICB, you will be sent a CMR6 figures letter or your notional rent letter with a figure on it for your notional rent. And here's where it gets interesting, or it gets interesting for me. This is where we can look to challenge it, get you more money in, get you to a level of rent that is appropriate for your property. Now, don't get me wrong. Some properties are already at that level that is appropriate for their property, but a lot of people aren't. So it's always worth checking it. And the reason I ask for you to check it is because we're not asking for a level of rent that's not appropriate for your building. It's the correct level of rent that's appropriate. And then that means that that money that's being reimbursed can be put back into the property. You know, bring it up into better standards if need be. So it's always worth challenging it. Now at the bottom of your letter, your CMR6 figures letter, it will state 12 weeks. You have 12 weeks to challenge this figure. it is a new statement that has been put onto GPs to challenge it within this time frame. Now, in your GMS contract, you actually have 3 years from the date of the letter. But it is conflicting and it is confusing as to what time frame and what regulations we're going to use. So to avoid that and to avoid that confusion, it is best just to get a primary healthcare surveyor to check the figure within that 12-week time frame. But don't feel pressured. Don't feel like you have to rush into it. Don't feel like you have to rush into signing these figures off. You have 12 weeks. You can speak to a primary care surveyor. You could speak to, another practice, see what they did, and then inform your own opinion on it. I would personally, and best practice, best advice I can give you is to get it checked by a primary healthcare surveyor. Now, what that will look like is either them coming out if they've never seen the property before, or if there's been big changes to the property within the last time they visited, or them doing a desktop valuation. They will check that rent against other properties within your area, other GPs that aren't in your area but have a very similar building to you, to see if you are actually receiving the correct level of rent. If you're not, and we believe you can challenge that rent, then we will form that opinion for you, have a discussion with you, and then take it on at the challenge. What that means is we will get in touch with the district valuer and the ICB. We will send our comparable evidence out to them to say that we believe that the level of rent should be increased to X, Y, or Z. And then a negotiation will take place. And the reason a negotiation can take place is because, as we said, this is a notion, it's an opinion of somebody's rent. And we have evidence from other areas, other surgeries, to suggest that that opinion of rent should be hired. Once that's done, there will be an agreement, and we will either come back with an increase, which is, what we're all hoping for, and the district valuer will sign that off. Now, all of this time that's taken to get your notional rent to the correct level for a challenge, it's okay. You're not losing out on anything. Your money's going to be backdated to the timestamp on your letter. So, if it takes 12 months, it's going to be backdated. You're going to see that increase backdated to the date that your rent review was due. So, yes, it takes time, but you're going to see it backdated, and it's going to get you a better rent to be able to give your premises a better value. So now let's look at ways we can increase your notional rent. And this is outside of us challenging it. This is things you could do within your premises. So there's a couple of things. We can create space. We can change the purpose of your space. And we can improve your space. They're all things we could do. And I'm going to give you examples of them all, and not one size fits all. Bear that in mind. You could be working in a converted house, which just isn't possible to extend and create more space. Or you could be working in a 3-story building, and it's just not possible to extend upwards or whatever it might be. But it is possible to change some of the rooms and what they're being used for, and it is possible to include or get better experiences for your patients. So let's talk about the first one, creating space. Creating space means increasing the footprint of your premises. Now, what I should caveat this with saying is that all these improvements need to be signed off by the ICB before you start. So what you need to do is create a business case plan, send it to the ICB about why this is important and why this is going to help patient services. And from there, you'll get an agreement to say, yes, you can increase the space, or you can do some works in the premises. But the creation of space is definitely something you want signing off by the ICB. You don't want to create space and then not receive a rental increase because you've created that space. But create space, increase your footprint. That's always a good place to start if it's appropriate for your property and if it's appropriate for what you're looking to achieve within the practice. Other ways to increase your notional rent is to repurpose space. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes you can't repurpose space in the fact that you've changed a kitchen into another consulting room because you potentially still need the kitchen part of it for your staff. That's just one thing. But what I mean by that is if you've got a cellar or you've got an attic and you're not using those for storage or note space or I've seen them used as sharp bins areas and things like that. Start thinking about how you could use those spaces, because that means that actually they're part of GMS space. The next thing is to then look at space that's potentially not utilised in the correct format. I've seen practices that have had gyms in for their staff. Lovely. But that's not going to get you a good notional rent on those spaces. What's going to get you a good notional rent in spaces is consulting rooms, it's treatment rooms, it's making sure storerooms are stocked with things for, treatments, sharps bins, any medication, fridges, all that sort of stuff. That's what's going to increase that space, not having, unfortunately, a gym as part of the practice. The next thing is to look at your property and let's talk about how we can increase patient experience. Have you got drop counters for your reception? Have you got widened corridors for wheelchair access? Do you have a ramp for wheelchair access at the entrance or exit of the property? Do you have no touch taps? Do you have hand dryers or towels? What can we do to increase hygiene, health and safety, and the patient experience overall? All those things are going to play a little factor in your notional rent. So it's definitely worth walking around your property and thinking of things you can change that will increase your notional rent. Speak to a primary care surveyor. They will help you navigate this landscape of what will increase notional rent, what won't. They're really good at being able to understand what your property can and can't do as well. So they're some of the ways we look to increase it. What does increasing notional rent mean for you in terms of succession, in terms of your future-proofing of your property? It's quite important. Notional rent plays a massive factor in when we're looking at market valuations, when we're looking at potentially sale of the premises in the future. It also plays a factor in the fact that, if you're doing these improvements to your property, the likelihood of you being part of the NHS strategy becomes a little bit higher. In a world where, we're seeing massive hubs and health centres, I'm sure you can see a couple of them behind me. The smaller GPs are struggling in terms of getting partners through the door, in terms of valuations, in terms of how they look to future-proof their property for their patients. What notional rent can do is, the higher the notional rent, it allows you to expand your premises, it allows you to keep your premises up to date with what NHS are looking for. But it also means that if you are looking to retire, if you are looking for GPs coming through, you become a more valuable asset and you become a more desirable asset. So there are things to be factored in and consider. I would say in this podcast, my top tips for notional rent would be your CMR1 form, to save a copy and keep it in your property folder. To, once you've had your CMR 6 figures letter, don't feel the pressure to sign it off straight away. Get somebody to check it, get somebody to review it. And thirdly, have a look around your premises this week. See what changes you could potentially look to make, and then get in touch with somebody and see what their thoughts are on whether that will increase or improve your notional rent. And I think that's probably it in terms of what I can help you with on notional rent in such a short period of time. But if you've got any questions, please get in touch with GP surveyors. They know, or we know, a lot about it. We've been doing it for 25 years. But equally, I'd love to hear your insights about what you've done with your properties to increase your notional rent, create space, repurpose space, or what improvements you've made. They're always good to hear, and I love a good story too. So yeah, please get in touch.